Hey, welcome everyone. Obviously, a lot has happened, and we have a lot to talk about. This is Afro Political. Hey guys, welcome to the conversation. This is two guys at our local here at Jay's Bar in Westlands.
Thank you.
Brilliant. So, lots has happened, and from our first episode, thank you so much for all the comments you've given us. We had plenty of to talk about in our first show, and in this episode, we have a lot to talk about, including the Supreme Court decision. But first, let's talk about the comments that came through, so that we just get past it.
Yeah.
We had one good comment that came about when we talked about strongholds. And it so appeared that we were talking about tribes as strongholds.
Yep.
Would you mind to explain that?
No, tribes are strongholds in the sense that at the end of the day, when you break down data, you will find that certain tribes voted for certain politicians. So
Even in this election.
Exactly.
Right.
Especially in this election.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not especially, but in this election, you've seen a lot of that.
Yeah.
Where you can be able to actually break down tribes and say, okay, this tribe voted this particular manner. And which is why, and again, look at also how the counties are broken. Mm-hmm. You have certain tribes living in certain counties. And
Right.
hence, when you look at the numbers in totality, the tribe factor is a key issue. So strongholds are tribes and with just a geographical leaning to them.
And that's what we talked about. If you want to look at the whole, if you were to explain it academically, or a good word for it, we like calling it identity politics. All right? So that's the clinical way to explain it. But it is what it is. I think talking about the numbers and being honest and forthright with how people voted, the way they voted. And if you look at this election, you can say certain tribes did vote for certain coalitions because the coalitions were set up in that sense. And,
Exactly.
and the system is set up in that sense. So,
And they campaigned in that sense.
so there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just what it is. It is what it is. And in this show, in this program, we'll be honest and we'll be forthright.
No sugarcoating.
Absolutely. So please, happy to hear your comments. If you have any questions for us, please do let us know. Tweet us, send us here a message on Facebook. We'll be happy to get that. But Marvin needed more than 2 beers, I think, because of that Supreme Court grand decision. So the judges, by unanimous decision, have invalidated Uhuru Kenyatta's election.
Yep.
In that invalidation, the judges are saying a few things. They're saying that one, the second respondent, who's President Uhuru Kenyatta,
No, that's the IBC.
the first respondent is the IBC.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
The second respondent is the chairman. The third respondent is the President Uhuru Kenyatta. I beg your pardon. The third respondent didn't have, any wrongdoing in this process, so he's cleared off for the wrongdoing. The first respondent, that's the IBC, is the one that is caught in the thin of thick things. So here we are, by a decision of margin, the majority decided, is it 4-2? It decides this election needs to be invalidated. Let me, a quick sense. What do you make of that?
First, I'm sad, clearly.
Why are you sad? We're going to election in 60 days.
Yeah, I'm sad because elections were done. And
and they were not done properly.
fair enough. I'm sad that this thing will have to continue for 2 more months because at the end of the day, we had just gone back to, we're just getting back actually to our businesses, to our normal lives, and then now it's back to campaign mode. So guys, I will be in a limbo for the next 2 months. Number two, I'm sad because for me the win was not contested.
It's been nullified, Marvin.
Don't
try to change history here.
We'll argue the details of it.
Yes.
Yeah? But for me, the votes themselves were not contested. What was contested is a procedure. So at the end of the day, what you have is procedure against actual votes.
All right.
Yes.
So, Marvin, let's first get this out of the way. That a product is as good as the process that produces it.
Yep.
Do you accept that?
Okay.
Absolutely no. The judges, in their decision, are saying a few things. That one, there's 2 ways to look at it. There is the qualitative way and the quantitative way, which is what you're alluding to.
Yes.
That we have to look at the exact numbers, that each form brought how many votes, and those votes into what extent, all right? Did they disenfranchise, or do they change, the results cumulatively? Now, in terms of the process, in terms of what the judges are decided to rely their decision on, which is the process, the qualitative, that leading up to this election, there's been very questionable decisions made by the IEBC. All right?
Is it leading up to or following the voting?
Both process. Leading up to the elections. Remember, we're talking about even the question of having the Al-Hurai, the ballot printing papers, and the things that are caught up in court. We've spent...
But the same court dismissed that case.
The last 2 years. That is the Court of Appeal. Again, remember, the Supreme Court is not bound by decisions of lower courts.
No, but did they hear that case?
They did not, but they're
exactly.
not bound by it.
Yeah, they are not bound by it, but again, they need to appreciate also the content of that case.
Okay, I'll take that. Okay, I'll take that. So let's take about what happened between on 8th, 5 or 1 p.m.
Yes.
Up to the moment that
the ruling was made.
The ruling was made, and Uhuru Kenyatta was elected president-elect. Up to that point, it's problematic. All right?
Tell me.
And this is where we get into it. That by the time the IEBC chairman Wafula Chebukati was announcing Uhuru Kenyatta president-elect, he didn't have all the Form 34As.
Yes.
All right? Now, why that's a problematic is for this sense that the Form 34A feeds to Form 34B, which feed for Form 34C. Now, what Chebukati handed President Kenyatta was Form 34C, which presumably should have had all the Form 34Bs inside it, which presumably should have had all Form 34As, all the 40,883 inside it. But it didn't. And that's where we are. The problem is that you announced the president without having all the Form 34As.
Okay. Now, go back a bit. Is the IEBC allowed to announce the president without all the results having come in?
I don't think they're allowed.
No, they are.
No.
Yes, they are.
I think
if the margins are unassailable, you are allowed by law to. Yeah? If the margins are unassailable, you're allowed by law, to actually announce someone as president-elect.
Let's ask this question in a different way so that it helps us. How does the IBC know that this candidate has more votes than the other in this election? How? Because Form 34As. Because in every polling station,
yes,
we had a Form 34A.
But at the end of the day, if you've received 36,000 Form 34As, out of the 40,000, what happens? You've received 36,000. Those 36,000, you've already had a clear lead. That clear lead, when you add up the remaining votes, even if you give them to one candidate, and you still have the 50 plus 1, you are allowed.
Yes, no. We are complicating the process here. All right. This is how this election was supposed to go. In essence, we had 290 presidential elections going on in this country, and this is what I mean. That in every constituency, there's a person called the returning officer. All right. This returning officer was in charge of this constituency, which had, assume 130 or 500 polling stations. All right.
Yeah.
The returning officer was in charge of a form called Form 34B. All right. That Form 34B is not complete until all the A's have come to him. All right. Yeah. Now, the chairman of the IEBC, who's the final presiding or national returning officer, is not aware of what's happening in a constituency. All right? Or in a polling station. He's only aware until after Form 34Bs have been issued to him. So I'm a returning officer in constituency X. I've received 299 Form 34As. I fill out my Form 34B. On that basis, I take it to him and say, you know what? My constituency has finished the presidential election, and these are the results. It's on that basis that the chairman knows how the country has voted.
Okay.
All right.
If I'll take the same argument, Now, let's assume you move a level up. You have the polling station data, The results have been pushed to constituencies.
Yes.
And then you have 270 out of 290 constituencies.
Yes.
Out of the 270 constituencies, still you have a lead that is seemingly unassailable when you consider the remaining constituencies,
The 20 that are remaining.
yeah, the remaining constituencies, you add up all their numbers and you say, if with all these numbers, I'm going to give them to the next candidate. If I give them the numbers to all the next candidate, still the threshold will not have been met and the 50+1 stands. So at that point, the IEBC chairman is allowed to announce a president.
Which is an interesting point, because bring us to the next question, which is,
Yes.
is that are we saying that all these results were not coming at random? That they're in fact coming from a system? Because the only way we would know that this certain, because this constituency could be waiting for one polling station.
Yes.
The next one could be waiting for 10. The other one could be waiting for 15 and 50 and so on and so forth. So the ones that are remaining from 34 is the 10,000 that were remaining. It's
10,000 from where?
It's possible that these forms were representing more than 20 constituencies. That there could be 10% of certain constituency, 90% in others, 60% in others. You know what I mean?
But also, that is dependent a whole great deal on also geography. It's dependent on where constituencies are located. It's dependent on the kind of population in this constituency. There are so many factors at play.
So this again is a good segue to bring us to what IEBC argued in court.
Yes,
all right?
what they argued.
Now, the lawyers for IEBC were presented with certain allegations. All right? Number one, on top of it, that the chairman, Wafula Chebukati, announced the president-elect without having all the Form 34A, all the results in his hands. All right? That was the first allegation. The second one is that they tampered with the Form 34As, Form 34B, and Form 34C. In his response, all right, to, I think this happens when you have many councils, that one of the councils for IEBC went ahead to say that the chairman, the argument you're making, the chairman doesn't need to have all the Form 34As before he announces the president. That in fact he can do calculations and figures out
what we try to do.
Yeah. Now, very clever. The second argument, which was presented by Paul Mwite, was that there was the chairman needed to have all the Form 34As, and in fact, by the time of announcing the results, he had all the Form 34As, right? But there were some errors and some human problems, which he bring to the court.
Which is inevitable.
Which he said that in Isiolo constituency, that a returning officer was unable to complete Form 34B because a printer had broken down. Brings the question, and begs the question, why the IBC printing Form 34As on the ground? I said, because they're presenting very different facets of cases. Essentially, they're telling us that they can move the goalposts as much as they want. And that is the problem with this election and why it was invalidated, in my view.
Okay, for me, the issue of invalidation, and I think as a key point, the invalidation did not happen, based on the votes cast.
That is true.
It was based on the transmission process.
Yes.
And again, we'll debate how the law has become an ass with regard to this particular process over the last few months. But the transmission process itself, Now, my understanding of what the judges said is, especially the dissenting judges, Jackton, what he said was, at the end of the day, when you count all of these votes, when you look at all the arguments, no one argued, that there was a problem with regard to the numbers of votes cast at polling station levels. No one argued. So if there's no argument there, and the results that were cast at the polling station are the same results that you have at the National Tallying Center, regardless of the process in between, the results stand. So if the procedure, if I throw a stone over there, or if I tie a stone to that dog and it walks over there, as long as the stone gets there.
So let me get this. Let me get this right.
The argument is, no, still, the argument is, you are supposed to take SGR from Nairobi to Mombasa.
Right.
But you went by road, or you went...
So I want to get this right.
Yes.
That what you're saying, essentially, it does not matter how you get a result. All right? That the fact that IBC came up with a result, it is fine. That's what you're saying. That's the import of the argument.
What I'm saying is this, the ruling and even the respondents, yeah, no one questioned the votes.
They questioned in this process. Again, we're talking about two different things, but I think we had arrived at the same result. That this process was so flawed that the result that came out of this process cannot stand. That is what they're saying.
The process of transmission.
That the principle is this, that a product, which is the election result, is as good as the process that brought it about.
Fair enough.
Now, if that process, we cannot vouch for it, if IEBC cannot stand, all right, in front of Kenyans and give us 1 + 1 = 2, and tell us that in some instances, some people who are printing, a printer broke down in Isiolo, and for that reason, the people in Isiolo could not give us Form 34B. In some instances, they changed and say, you know what? In fact, we don't need all the Form 34As. What we needed was just to figure out and say that, you know what,
the threshold has been met
and
to allow.
Even if we give Raila Odinga the rest of the constituents that are supposed to come, he will not get whatever. So now IEBC were unable. If we're just to argue on what happened in this case, in my view, IEBC was totally, completely unable to explain how the results they gave Kenyans, how they arrived at that result.
No, but
and that is the problem.
The issue, and then maybe it's something actually we had discussed earlier. The issue was you have a qualitative argument and a quantitative argument.
Right.
Yeah. So the case that was made, as you said, was qualitative.
Right.
The argument in response was quantitative.
Yes. And the judges decided to go with the qualitative process.
And which is why the case was determined based on process and procedure.
So in that instance then, so we move the discussion forward.
Yes.
Were IEBC incompetent in not just leave the election alone, but getting their lawyers not being able to explain how they arrived at the result? Because at the end of the day, that is what it is.
Yep.
We are in a place whereby IEBC are not enabled themselves to tell Kenyans how we arrived at this election result. Were they not only competent?
I will say they are incompetent in that regard. But also number two, yeah, how did they end up there? How did they end up there? Because what you had, yeah, you had one litigation after another, leading to this.
And it's the argument that those litigations impinged or made it impossible for the IEBC to conduct a free, fair, verifiable elections.
Because at the end of the day, look, today we agree. We're playing football, yeah? You get hurt, yeah? You get hurt. Someone hurts your toe. And you're there for a few minutes. When you come back, the referee says the rules have changed. Yeah, they've changed so that your toe can be protected. And then someone else at halftime, something else happens. Yeah, and throughout this process, at the end of the day, the players in this game will not understand the rules because you keep changing, you keep twisting and turning. Yeah, so that at the end of the day, these guys had a 600,000 thereabouts manpower workforce. These guys have to be retrained afresh. Okay, now the laws have changed. So what happens? Now you need to do this instead of this. Now you need to do X instead of Y. So at the end of the day, for me, all these litigations leading up to the elections played a part in terms of making it more difficult, even for guys who were trained and who were working even with the previous elections on the basis of that election. Found it difficult to know, okay, maybe this is how we need to do things. Maybe it has been changed and whatnot. And hence, maybe the little issues you had here and there.
Can we say this? That this election and how we conducted it, the first change of it happened after the Supreme Court decision of 2013.
Yes.
That there was some, inside that ruling, there were some questions that the Supreme Court asked, and there were some fundamental changes that the IEBC had to do,
yes,
right, so that they can conduct the next elections in light and in respect and bringing on board, all the experiences from 2013.
Yes.
All right. Now that is one. So then the second is the fact that people going to court and asking, for instance, the Maina decision and the Supreme Court decision, which was adversely mentioned in the Supreme Court, right? That the import of that was this: that the election results are going to be announced at the constituency. So those are 290, levels, right?
Results.
Yeah. Now, what that essentially meant was that the IEBC needed to turn a few things, Okay, one, to stop this idea that the returning officers are supposed to bring them physical forms to bombers. Okay, and include a process that says that you will get results from the presiding officer, okay, in your polling station. And the presiding officer is supposed to do a few things, all right? Number one, he's going to send an SMS, okay, to a portal, SMS. But that is not the result. Until the presiding officer takes a screenshot or a PDF or a picture or whatever it is of the actual form, all right, and forward it to the constituency and then to the national. Then he comes with the physical form to the constituency. At that point is when we have provisional results.
Okay.
The court was very clear. What the IBC decided to do, they said, you know what? No. What people had sent, and they said it in the Supreme Court. What the presiding officers were sending were data and statistics. Where is that in the law? Marvin, you can't stand with these guys. Where is that in the law? They messed up this election in a big way. They were unable to explain to us the results that they gave us actually came from the people. That is the disconnect I have between them. That until and unless they say, you know what, the law has changed. Yes, granted. You have little time to turn things around. Granted. But it is very clear what they're supposed to do. Where are the forms, by the time of announcing the results, you should have had all those forms. If by Friday evening, I think it was the 15th or thereabouts, is it the 14th when Uhuru Kenyatta was announced? By that 14th, if IBC had all the Form 34As, their story would have been much, much easier to sell. That is my view.
Okay.
I don't think they can be allowed to run away with it because they're going to tell us, the process of conducting elections is very complex, then it has, human errors and whatever. Granted, and there's space for that. But in this election, they're unable to prove to us that the numbers they gave us, those numbers actually exist.
The comfort I derive from this, the comfort I derive from this is that at the end of the day, I know the numbers are not questioned.
So they're not dead voters?
There were no dead voters,
And hacking didn't happen?
And hacking didn't happen. There was no fraud. There was no one talked about fraud. They only talked about process.
Why do you think the IBC were reluctant and unable in some instances to grant fully, what the court had ordered? Because that is going to show up in the judgment. The servers, failing to open the servers, telling us, people in France are still sleeping. So when they wake up, they're going to open up these servers for us. France is only 2 bloody hours from us.
And they can wake up.
So what was that?
No, still, I don't think the case, from what was said, from the judgment and from the dissenting arguments, there was no mention. There was no mention of fraud.
We have to wait for the full judgment.
Okay, we'll wait.
On the 21st. I mean,
yes.
for both ends. Njoki Ndongo has to do her own judgment. In fact, I want you to come on this show and argue from Njoki Ndongo's dissent. I'll be happy if you do it. But anyway, I'm not holding you against it. Moving on. In 21 days, we'll have the full judgment from both ends, and we'll be able to look at what the majority decision, decided, and on what principles they were convinced, what is the evidence, the weight of the evidence. And then we'll have to hear from Njoki Ndongo as well.
There's also Jackson.
May I ask, why are you running away from Njoki Ndongo?
I'm not running.
So are you giving undertaking in this program that you will come and in 21 days argue from Njoki Ndongo's dissenting argument?
And Jackson. And Jackson's. And also having reviewed the other cases, by the end of the day, I'm convinced from what I heard today that this was strictly a procedural issue.
Okay. All right.
That's my take. I'm convinced it's a procedural issue. And at the end, given that, even after 2 months, and maybe we can transition to that.
Yeah.
After 2 months, when the elections come, what do you think?
So my sense of things is this: that if anyone goes into this process imagining that it's the same electorate, it's the same issues and the same principles, then I think they would be committing a fatal mistake. Wow. My sense is that we had an election which was 6-in-1 in the 8th of August, which was the member of county assembly, we had the senator, member of parliament, woman rep, and governor at once, and then we had the presidency as well. Now we've removed all the 5. We're going to have one ballot, all right, this time around. Now, a few things, in my view, are going to happen. That there are some voters or some voting blocks or strongholds which belong to both sides of the coalition, which were locked in by the virtue and the fact that the community interests were taken care of in this voting block. And everyone had jumped into it because they need to make a choice and make an option, and this seemed like a more natural outfit. Okay? Now, that is now gone in many respects. Secondly, you have governors who've just come into office who mostly probably broke, who want to get onto the business of building the county. And everyone else who's saying, you know what, the time for politics is done. We need to fix a few things. I made promises to my people. I need to deliver a few things. You know, you have members of parliament who come in, a bunch of independents who want to get into the big of things, you know, and start making things work. This election is substantially different. The ground is not the same. That is my view. That any of this campaign that sits back and think that I still have my stronghold as it were before, I think that will be committing a mistake.
I'll agree with you, but only to a point. The elections will be different. But the difference will come to light based on the approaches taken. Yeah. Number one, don't forget that still you have a 1.4 million gap, and I'm saying this. Understanding
that has been invalidated.
No, it has been, but I've said they've invalidated because of the process, not because of the quantitative numbers.
Again,
and I'll go actually even now, beginning now. I'll argue. I'll refer to your favorite Supreme Court judge. Yeah, Njoki said that
she's my favorite. I have to. Yes.
She said that at the end of the day, no one questioned. Yeah, the results of the polling station. Yeah. No one actually said that these results are wrong. The only issue, the argument was on the process. Now, based on that, so for me, my assumption still is that you have a candidate who has a 1.4 million gap. But
which have been invalidated.
Which are fair enough.
Just a side note, but I don't move it.
It's let's say mentally, it gives people a bit of confidence that you could be able to marshal these numbers, invalidated or not. Yeah, mentally it gives you confidence that actually you can hit these numbers. Now, number two, how now do you approach the elections from both sides? Yeah, how do you approach the elections? The opposition guys, given again the numbers, because these numbers will have to serve as a metrics. Because at the end of the day, only presidential results have been invalidated, not the rest. So the rest also speak. Yeah, they paint a very clear picture in terms of the shifts, the twists and turns. So they tell you that if you have an MP in Ukambani, if a Jubilee MP in Ukambani, if you have a Jubilee MP in Nyamira, in Kisii, if you have governors in Wajir, in the entire northeastern, who voted Jubilee, that one tells you, that the shift was not just at presidential level, but it communicates that also the shift happened.
In 2007, Marvin, Mwai Kibaki won with 37 members of parliament of PNU. Out of 190, I think, members of parliament. ODM, I think, had, 110? And then the rest spread from other parties. So it's possible, if unless...
This is the election
2007.
that led to bloodshed.
It's the theft, the theft of the election, or the election of the theft, right? So there was someone who won an election, because it was upheld. I mean, in many ways. I mean, unless you're saying Mwai Kibaki's second term in office was not a real.
What I'm saying, if you're going to refer to elections,
it's a historical fact.
They are better.
It's a historical fact that we have to live with it. That he was elected in the second term with fewer members of parliament as compared to ODM.
Why do you have a Supreme Court now?
For those reasons, so that we do not allow such madness again to happen.
Because so don't refer to madness as a basis for your argument.
No. I'm taking this point. I think the opposition has a bigger mountain to climb in this fresh election. It's not a rerun. It's actually fresh election. They have a bigger mountain to climb for the simple reason that one, they've lost ground in terms of members of parliament and governors and senators in those elections, in the other subsequent elections, all right? Which were not in contention, all right? Now, the question is, how will Jubilee use those numerical advantage in those areas to help them actually, go the step further, all right? And that, I think, is what I'm struggling with here. That there's two ways to look at it. The areas which are locked, and there's you cannot unlock them. Whatever you're going, it doesn't matter, all right? Then the areas which are up in arms, all right? And then the areas which were there with you because of we belong together. But now, they might not be as enthusiastic, all right? Let me not say they are going to switch on the other side. They might not, but they are not be as enthusiastic because they were with you because you provided, a backup or a good way for us to be in one big house. All right, and this is for both sides, not just for Jubilee alone. It's for both sides. All right, NASA has the same problem. He has to deal with how do they invigorate areas which voted, for MPs and governors belonging to the other coalition, and then the presidency went the other side. So they have to contend with that. And I have in my mind right now, I think Narok or the areas of Masai region. I have Kisii in mind, and parts of Coast Province. So this is a problem for both coalitions. They have to figure that out. And how you go the extra mile is, my view, what I think is the question.
Do you expect to see low voter turnouts or higher voter turnouts?
It's a very difficult question. I think, this I'll go on a hunch and maybe I'm wrong. I think we'd have an equal, if not more, voter turnout in the next election. Because in the last 3 weeks, just the level of people getting, connected with what had happened in this election was really high. I mean, and you get this from the night that, the president was announced, that you had areas which went out to party the whole night. You had areas which went out to protest the whole night. So this election was not an academic exercise for the people of this country, all right? People were given real promises. People had, put their hopes, fears, and dreams into a certain, manifesto or certain political outfits.
And now they have been invalidated.
I think Marvin needs another beer.
Oh, you need to sip yours. Yeah. There are so many people who are invested in this across both sides.
Yeah.
So those who are protesting and those who are celebrating in equal measure.
Yeah.
Now, both. So invalidation has appeased some.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
invalidation has angered
others.
or depressed
others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, based on that, and based on how now the various political leanings are going to use that, because the idea, this rerun is not going to be based, if you ask me, on the strength of manifestos. That was the first time.
Yeah.
So the first round was on the strength of manifesto. The second round is purely emotional. Yeah? It is emotional.
Yeah.
And that's what these guys are going to, you prey on the emotion. Yeah? You say, okay, look, we went out, we voted, it has been invalidated. What do we do now? Let's go. Or
we can confirm, and the courts can confirm, and finally they've told us and showed you our elections have always been stolen.
Yes. Again, and I've said, it is emotional on both sides. So you had to make that argument. I could not. Yeah. So
no, Maraga did. I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's going to be emotional.
Right.
Yeah. And how that emotion now is utilized to ensure that there's higher voter turnout, to ensure that no one is left behind this time round, is what now will be the difference that makes the difference.
All right, so we're going to speak about this, obviously now, the subsequent, shows and whatever, but let's just start to wrap it up. And just where the place of the Supreme Court is currently. In 2013, the Supreme Court decided to uphold the election of Uhuru Kenyatta, obviously exercising judicial restraint. And that didn't go very well for the members of that court because they were almost hounded out in office. And it created this idea that the court didn't have the political capital, if you like, to sort of confront the political problems. That was in 2013. In this election, we pretty much, sort of suspected the same in many views, that the court would want to, and that's why you had all these talks from everyone telling us that, the threshold for invalidating an election results is so high. That is why only 4 countries, now we are now the 4th countries, have been able to do it. And that is Ukraine, Austria, Maldives, and now Kenya. All right. And so we went about that because we thought it's very difficult.
Try to be fast.
So where this places the court in my view, and I want to go first, is that what Maraga's court has managed to do is to first give Africa another set of
legal
precedents, and I think in many ways this is the boldness that they would require, that the processes of election, which in this continent is a problem, we have to accept that many countries go into sham elections, all right? That the process of elections do matter, all right? And it's an important bit of the law. And elections are not an event. They're a process. Leading up to it, every little bit of it makes the big house. What in my view that does is it buys our judicial and our judiciary, our democracy, a bit much more leeway to experiment with ourselves a bit more. I think that does, and I think that's a good thing, all right? I'm sure you'll disagree. But my point is this, that if Maraga had returned a verdict of, they had the opposite verdict, that, you know what, there were no problems with the elections, accept and move on, I think it would have been very, very difficult for President Uhuru Kenyatta and the government that he would have constituted to go on for the next 4 or 5 years with this tag of they were not elected correctly, using the process and procedures that are needed. I think that would have been a big pain in someone who's going to go for 5 years to walk around with a big tag of, an election that was stolen in many ways.
I'm not going to disagree. I don't disagree just on for the sake of disagreeing.
It's good to know. It's good to know.
Yeah.
Yes. Mental note.
I know that legal precedents plays a key role, and even let's not forget that IEBC has drastically changed since 2013. Yeah,
they've made really worse mistakes in this election than they did. I would say it. I would say it. In this election, they made really big mistakes. In 2013, they were much better.
Yeah, because the laws were simpler.
But we did not elect them to be simple. If they can't handle a bloody election, then they should just bloody resign.
No, but here's the thing: you go and you complicate the process, and then you come and say, "No, you messed up here because of." I think it's foolish.
One final question: who's going to conduct this election?
IBC.
Chebukati, Chiloba.
The Supreme Court is going to pronounce itself. Yeah.
Which someone can move with the Supreme Court decision and move to any court and seek the removal from office of any of those officers.
If it affects the 60-day period,
if we can do it within the 60-day period.
If you can do it the 60-day period, fair enough. It's a legal right to do what you need to. But if it's going to affect the 60-day period, I'm sure the courts will pronounce themselves accordingly, knowing very well that they might lead us into a constitutional crisis otherwise.
All right. So was this a good decision or a great decision?
Why are you trying to? I can't.
All right.
You're buying the beers today.
That wraps it up for us.
You're hopeless.